our problems by saying we are victims of a conspiracy of an international kind. That is an easy escape route. And our politicians take that route more often than not. They are able to tell you we are where we are because we were colonized, they will tell you. They are able to tell you we are where we are because there is a neo-colonial project which is alive and well. They are able to tell you we are where we are because of the evil alliance of the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, and the World Trade Organization. They tell us that. And you and me, who are victims of their explanations, nod in approval. But are they right when they tell us that that is the source of our problems? Because when we choose to take the position that we are victims of conspiracy, then we do not look at our internal circumstances. Then we do not interrogate our politicians. And I'm suggesting to this audience that there may well be a conspiracy. But that is not the reason why we are where we are. There is a sense in which we too have contributed. The politicians have contributed, and we who follow them, who are the voters, have also contributed. In a manner of speaking, we are co-authors of our own misfortune. And when we are blaming them, we should also blame ourselves. But it is also true to say that the current state and status of the continent of Africa is as a result of an architecture in which we did not participate. Rwanda, as we know it today, is a product of a colonial architecture. Nigeria, including the name Nigeria, is a product of Lord Lugard and the girlfriend. Ghana, Kenya, South Africa, all these countries arbitrarily parceled out in 1884 to 1885 in Berlin. And when they sat in Berlin during that period, not a single African country was represented. Some say Ethiopia was. But what kind of representation? It wasn't, in fact. And why were they dividing Africa into spheres of influence? Because Africa was a hunting ground. So in Ghana, the British would get their gold. In Nigeria, they would get their agricultural products and cotton and leather. In the Gambia, they would visit occasionally when it was winter in Europe. In the Democratic Republic of Congo, they would get the minerals. Remember that all these colonizers started as companies, and later they brought in their administrators. When we started to fight to regain our independence, and we regained our independence, or so we think, complete with the national anthems, complete with new flags, complete with new national mottos. So Ghana, on the 6th of March in 1957, regained our independence. Nigeria did. And all the countries, until we can now count that we are 55 of such independent countries, or 54, depending on what the Moroccans say about Sahrawi. But when we regained independence, we did not alter the situation. Somehow, those who are in the forefront of the struggle for independence retained the architecture of the post-colonial state. I can still very vividly remember, and many of you will remember courtesy of history, on the 7th day of January 1961, that famous speech of Ghana's Kwame Nkrumah in Casablanca, Morocco. He warned those who were present that if we do not unite and create a single country, in the next few years, the leaders here present are going to get used to the titles president. They are going to get used to the titles ministers and governors. They are going to create national armies. And within a short time, we'll be fighting amongst ourselves, and the neo-colonialists will control us remotely. The Osagyefo was right, because that is what exactly is happening as we speak. And the Osagyefo did not stop there. In 1963, in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, he again reminded the leaders who are present on that day. There were 32 of them. Each one of them was inspired. And he told them, he told his audience, that is not long ago. It is 59 years ago. Some of us are older than that here. In other words, he spoke when we were born, and he was saying, don't let us leave Addis Ababa without a single currency, without a single army, without a single market. He told us. We did not listen. So today, as I speak to you, we have 33 currencies in the continent of Africa. Naira, cedi, shilling, francs, metikais, dalasi, kwanza. And if you want to know, and I do not mean to annoy anybody, if you want to know the status of our currency, when you board an international flight, this is what they say. You can buy anything on duty-free as long as you trade on hard currency, which means the dollar, which means the euro, which means the British pound, and increasingly the Chinese yuan, which means the naira is not a serious currency, which means that the Kenyan shilling is not a serious currency, the cedi is not a serious currency, which means that every transaction we undertake in Africa is terminated in the dollar. Even if you go to the banks now here in Abuja, if you ask for dollars, you will see the teller going inside. They keep the dollar a lot more safely than they keep the naira. That is the state in which we find ourselves, the almighty dollar. And I want to imagine that even as the launchers of the book were launching the book, When they were saying 20 million or 5 million, some of you were already counting and calculating how much is it in dollars. We did not listen to the Osakiev. We ended up in creating these multiple institutions. Julius Nyerere, speaking on the 6th day of March 1997, on the occasion of the 40th anniversary of the independence of Ghana, reminded his audience that they had met in 1964 in Accra, Ghana. And in Accra, once again, Kwame told his audience, listen to me. Let us unite. He had said it even in Addis Ababa. Let us unite, and I am prepared not to be the president. I even suggest the capital of that new Africa, let it be in Bangui, or Leopoldville, then called now Kinshasa. They did not listen. And Nyerere says that when they were in Accra, he had a former head of state saying, when the project had failed, I'm happy that I'm leaving Accra, still a president of my country. That is the Africa that you are asking me to talk about. That is her state. Disunited as we speak, weak, and sometimes even disrespected. Today, and over the years, the appetite for making Africa great again has never died. It has always been there. And there has been no shortage of efforts across the continent of Africa. In 1963, we ended up with the Organization of African Unity, which did a few good things we cannot deny. The African Liberation Movement, which was headquartered in Dar es Salaam in Tanzania, was one of the bodies that was in the forefront of liberating the countries that had not been liberated. They made a contribution for the liberation of Zimbabwe, for the liberation of Namibia and of South Africa and of Angola and of Mozambique. They made their contribution. But when we regained our independence, there is a sense in which we have not realized our potential despite the best intention of the best of us. Is it the conspiracy? Yes, it is true that there is a neo-colonial project that is alive and well. Yes, there is a sense in which the colonizers left, but they never left. You see it in some of the things that they continue to do. Right now, here in Abuja, there is a meeting of Commonwealth countries to discuss tax. And I say, why meet under the aegis of the Commonwealth? Meet under the aegis of the African Union. And I'm quite certain that the former French colonies will also be meeting somewhere in Abidjan. And it's possible that the former British and Portuguese colonies will also be meeting somewhere in Luanda. The erstwhile colonizer still manipulates us. Our emotional true north is the capital of the former colonizer. If you ask the president of Cameroon where he would want to celebrate his birthday, he will possibly tell you Paris. And he does. If you ask somebody from Angola, they would possibly tell you Lisbon. If you ask somebody from Nigeria, or holding all factors constant, where they would want to be, London. If you ask somebody from La Côte d'Ivoire, Paris, Democratic Republic of Congo, Bruxelles, We are mentally captured. We are mentally captured, and until the day we decolonize our minds, we will do all the things that we want to do, but we will never realize our potential. Those of you who are in the military, you know that the occasion where you now say that you've been properly trained is when you have had a stint at Sandhurst. That is a fact, because we still are suffering from inferiority complex. A typical Nigerian or African who is a student and has attended his PhD at the University of Ibadan, from undergraduate to PhD, he then goes for a 3-month training at Cambridge. When he comes back, he now has a sticker on his car saying, "I'm an alumni of Cambridge," after 2 weeks. But he was in Ibadan for 10 years. If that is not mental capture, what is it? When you see, when we are still talking about conspiracy, many of you are very erudite and you have attended conferences outside of the country. When the American government sends you to the International Visitors Program to visit the United States of America, you think it is for free? No, it is indoctrination. When you see the American Cultural Center in Abuja, do you think it is for free? When you see the Japanese Cultural Center, you think it is for free? The British Cultural Center, the French Cultural Center, the Goethe Institute, the Confucius Institute, the Turkish Cultural Center. Why? Because the mind is the standard of the man and the woman. Control the mind, then you control the individual. And you can sit and you can predict what they are going to do. Africa is a victim of conspiracy to that extent. But we must also ask ourselves the question, are we the only peoples who have been colonized? No. So that argument cannot be available to us only. There are countries which have been colonized and they have succeeded somehow in disentangling themselves from the chains of colonization. India was colonized. South Korea was colonized. Japan was under control. China was colonized. Vietnam was colonized. Malaysia was colonized. Singapore was colonized. Brazil was colonized. Chile was colonized. So the whole question about colonization can no longer be available to us. It cannot be the only excuse why we continue to underperform. There must be something else. Nana Kobina Nketsia, a traditional ruler in Ghana, has written a book, African Culture in Development, the Ghanaian Paradigm. And he says that it is true that the architecture of politics, the architecture of economics, the architecture of everything in Africa was conceived from outside. And we too imbibed it line, hook and sinker. And I want you to look at it for a little. And he says, by quoting John Henry Clark, that Africa cannot succeed without re-examining her institutions of governance. And we have never. I want you to look at many African countries, both physically and otherwise. when we regained independence, we had constitutions which were referred to as the Westminster Model Constitution. The Constitution of Nigeria is Westminster Model. Until, of course, you wrote your own constitution in the 1907. Kenya, Westminster Model. Zambia, Westminster Model. And it is never lost on me that the house that was occupied by the colonial governor is the very same that is occupied by the independent president. It has never been lost on me that when we form government, we have the same nomenclature that they use ministers. When you go to our parliaments, the white wigs that they use is what our speakers still use. If you look at the way we make decisions, we still have the mace. The way they address their judges, my lord, and I'm a lawyer and we do that. And we think it's such a great thing when we say, my lord. The same thing. In other words, we are mentally captured. Particularly those of us who have had the advantage of formal European education, they don't worry about us. They can predict how we are going to behave. First of all, we are going to speak in English as we are speaking, not in Yoruba, or in Fulani, or Fulfude, or Gibo. They can think that we are going to speak in French, and we even sometimes measure intelligence on one's ability to speak a foreign language. He is very intelligent. He speaks good French. As if you cannot be intelligent when you speak Igbo, or Fulani, or Fulfude. I'm very happy that the federal government has now said that they are going to teach some of these languages in lower classes. That is, and I'm saying this, that we may understand that we have a governance crisis. We have a governance crisis. That is why the African countries are unstable. But in the next 1 year, we are going to have no less than 9 elections in Africa. 9 general elections across the continent of Africa, including here in Nigeria. But in every African country where there is or where there are elections, people are scared. So election is not just a regular process of determining who is going to be in charge of affairs. It threatens the nation because it is life and death. Because politics has become the shortest avenue for material aggrandizement. There are 2 things in Africa today. If you want to be rich without working hard at all, be a politician or found a church. That is, in all African countries, that is what I see. That is why people engage in cutthroat competition, and throats are actually cut in pursuit of political power. And that, in my view, undermines development. You know, in the continent of Africa, we now think that periodic elections is what democracy is. That is not democracy. We have perfected the art of manipulating democratic processes. Those who win the elections are not necessarily the ones who win the election, the ones who are announced to have won the elections in many African countries. And when that happens, there is always constant agitation so that we do not address agriculture. We do not address health. We do not address education. The net effect is that development is undermined. It is Julius Nyerere who in 1966 said that when we talk about development, we do not necessarily mean roads, although that constitutes development. We do not necessarily mean big buildings. We mean beyond that the development of the people themselves, their ability to feed themselves with dignity. But do we do that for our people? We don't. We don't. How much do we pay our health workers in many African countries? A pittance. How much do we pay our academics? A pittance. How much do we pay our researchers? A pittance. But how much do we pay our politicians? The whole world. And I'm saying this with pain, because until the day that Africa begins to think otherwise, we are going nowhere. Our so-called development will be undermined. And Africa has no shortage of declarations that we make. We make many declarations. In the health sector, as I've already said, we said here in Abuja, 15% of our budgets. Not a single country. Tanzania reached 10%, and Mauritius and the Seychelles and Botswana. Today, when we are sick, unless you are suicidal, you don't go to a hospital in Africa. You go outside. You go to India. You go to London. Even ministers for health in African countries will never go to those hospitals. Why? Why? Yet, we have the Abuja Declaration on Health. On the air skies, the skies, the only African airline that is running and makes profit is the Ethiopian airline. Yet we have the Yamoussoukro Declaration on free skies. Most airlines have died. Nigeria, dead. South Africa, dead. Ghana, dead. Gambia, dead. Others which claim to be airlines with a single aircraft, which their president can take at any minute without any warning, dead or dying. How can a continent be in that space? Look at little Qatar. Little Qatar. Qatar is smaller than the state of Bauchi. Smaller. Look at the stadia that they have built in 8 years with one resource, natural gas. Compare that, permit me to speak my mind. Compare that with Nigeria. The 5th largest producer of oil on earth. And yet they are accused of fuel in the capital. How can we excuse that? How can we possibly excuse that? With gas from the Delta, we are flaring the gas. The Democratic Republic of Congo, with minerals worth $34.1 trillion under her belly. What is she famous for? War. Is that conspiracy from anybody? No. It is us. It is us. And until the day we are able to say that there is something wrong with the things we are doing, we are always going to blame other people. And you can go on and look at the area even of vaccination. You know, when you look at vaccination, not a single African country produced vaccine. We were begging, oh, AstraZeneca, come to us. Oh, Moderna, come to us. Oh, come to... Why should we be given? Don't we have scientists? When I travel across the world, there are Nigerian scientists all over the world doing amazing things. But when they come here, you pay them $100 per month. No conspiracy.